Good morning. Welcome back to GP Outdoors. 4 months and 70 hours. It's time to tell you what I like and what I don't like about this LX2610. I hope you'll stick around. Cheers. For context, in case you're new to the channel, I've only ever owned one other tractor in my life. It was a B2601, which I traded in for this LX2610 4 months ago. It was an open station tractor, but same horsepower. So you're probably going to find I'm going to do some comparisons between the 2601 and the LX2610 as I go over this tractor today. Let's start with the most obvious. Let's talk about the cab. Absolutely 2 thumbs up. This tractor is very well appointed, has a lot of features and options and benefits, and the heating and the air conditioning in this cab is excellent. I know I've had a number of people telling me that they find that there's not enough heat in the tractor they're driving, but I've been driving this in the cold now for a couple of weeks, and although it may take 15 or 20 minutes to warm up, she gets nice and hot and toasty in there, to the point that you've got to turn it off or turn it down. I've also had a number of people ask me if I'm having a problem with fogging up or steaming of these windows. And I have on several occasions found that in the early morning, it'll steam up or fog up, but very quickly, after about 15 or 20 minutes, the windows will all clear. It has a rear window defogger, which works excellent, and the placement of the various vents and the ability to move those vents around as you need helps you to determine how you direct the air. And as you can see, there are different settings to allow you to operate which vents flow and which ones don't. The radio, it's not a bad radio, but I'll have to admit it's always a little staticky. And I get it, when you're out in the forest, you're probably not in the best reception areas, but even when I'm out in the open, although it's pretty clear, it's still a little bit staticky. Really nice feature of this radio though, which I really like, is it's Bluetooth enabled. So when my lovely wife calls me and I'm out working in the forest, I can get her phone calls direct. And in fact, the reception on this radio for the Bluetooth is quite impressive. I've been literally 60 or 70 feet away from this cab, and the phone rings and it still picks up the signal. This seat, huge step up from the B2601. I remember I had a subscriber once ask me how I found the seat on the old tractor. And not having any other experience, I said, well, it's fine, it's a tractor. You know, it was a little springy, so I thought it was okay. Rough ride, mind you, but it was a tractor. Seats adjustable, back to front, forward and backwards, and the ability to adjust your suspension based on your weight provides a lot more comfort. So 2 thumbs up on the seat, hands down. One of my favorite improvements I found with this LX2610 is that this joystick is far smoother and far more fluid than the B2601 was. Easy to dump, curl, lift, etc., even when you're under load with a full bucket, whereas my B2601 was always a little bit sticky or difficult to push into float or to dump when you had a large bucket on. I also have to say, really love these mirrors, not only because they're so big, very easily adjustable, but I love this breakaway mount. Because when you're in the forest and you're hitting branches or tree limbs, I have not once had it caught. It just very easily snaps out of place and snaps back in. Being a larger and heavier tractor, I really welcomed the additional weight I'm able to trailer on the back of this tractor. The old B2601 gave you a maximum of about 2,000 pounds. I can get 3,300 pounds in a trailer on the back of this tractor, and I pulled some pretty heavy loads through the forest. And unlike the B2601, haven't really ever felt the front end become light on the tractor. It seems to pull it just fine and doesn't labor at all. One of the most frequent questions I've had over the last 4 months is that you've asked me why I chose to have a 2610 instead of upgrading to the 3310. My old B2601 was a 25 horsepower tractor, and you've asked me why I chose to stay with a 25 horsepower tractor. So here's my rationale for it. I had 3 years with the B2601 on the property, so I have a pretty sound idea of the different types of applications or the needs of that tractor and the needs of the property. Never found, as far as I can remember, ever a need for more horsepower. More capacity sometimes, but not more horsepower. The 2610 is a much larger tractor, has, bigger lift capacity, a number of different improvements or larger capacities with a 25 horsepower engine. If you take a look at the spec sheet between the 3310 and the 2610, they're pretty much identical when it comes to capacities or performance, with the exception of the fact that the 3310 weighs a little more and it's got about 6 more horsepower. The big difference between the two was the horsepower on the PTO on the rear. Your 3310 will get you 27 horse. This will still get you 19.5, which is what I had on the B2601. All of my implements run just fine on a 19 horsepower. So short of that consideration, I just came to the conclusion that for the extra money, I didn't need 27 horsepower on my PTO. Otherwise, all things considered, they're pretty much identical tractors from a performance perspective. And as you probably know by now, if you've been researching tractors, horsepower is not the only consideration. It's how the tractor has been engineered to utilize that horsepower. As you know, you can get to 25 horse in a BX, a B, an LX, an L. It's bigger tractors, larger tractors with bigger capacities using the same or roughly the same horsepower. That's why I didn't go for the 3310. A couple of notable points about this tractor. As I mentioned, it's much heavier than the B2601 is, and it has more capacities and abilities. And I really think I found kind of the right class for my applications here on the property. And what I would say, or how I would characterize it, is it has more heft, so to speak. In other words, when I'm pulling a box blade or a rear blade and I'm grading the driveway and she's digging in, on the old B2601, you could almost feel like you were being pulled by the box blade. It would make it through and it would grade fine, but you could almost feel it was being pulled or it was dragging it. In this tractor, as you've seen, I've done the same types of tasks with it. It's like you don't even feel the box blade is on the back. You know you're doing it, you're looking behind you, you can see it digging into the gravel, but you don't feel that same pull. It has the heft or the weight to be able to carry the blade or the box blade through that driveway as you're trying to grade that gravel. And similarly with the front end loader, when you're bucketing gravel or you're doing something with the front end, whether it's the grapple or the bucket, it's the same kind of feeling. You bucket a full 60-inch bucket of gravel, it seems to carry it better, much more stable than my old B2601 was, even though I only had a 51-inch light-duty bucket on the front of that. Despite having ballast on the back, there was definitely a difference in its presence or its confidence in carrying the load. These lower lift arm extensions, great addition to the 3-point hitch. I've used them several times because I do have a couple of attachments that are not quick hitch compatible, and they are pretty handy when you've got a 400 or 500 pound implement stuck on the ground and you need to try to maneuver it into that lift pin. The one drawback to having these is when you've got your quick hitch on here and you try to bring in your upper control arm, tilting your quick hitch backwards, it ends up banging into the front of this extension. So you can't pull it in too far before it's kind of stopped at the bottom here. And hey, 2 inches more clearance, never a bad thing when you spend most of your time in a forest. So now let's talk about some of the things I'm not sure I like too much. Despite being a bigger tractor, it's a lot slower, and I mean noticeably slower than my B2601 was, regardless of what range you're in. By spec, it says it's about 1 to 2 miles per hour slower, and I'm not a mechanic, but I think, perhaps that means it's geared slower or geared differently. But when you're trying to head off to your neighbor's place to help them out, it makes the trip a lot longer, and it's noticeably slower in any gear. It's got the pull, it's got the horsepower, it's got the torque, which is great when you're working with it, but when you just want to run down the road, it's a long drive. But then again, it is a tractor, it's not a race car. But you got it. Let's go for a drive. It has a very, very loud hydraulic whine to it. And it gets worse when you're going up inclines. It falls off when you go down declines. But as you'll see here, as I start to go a little bit higher on this incline we're approaching, it'll get even louder. Now, I had an open station B2601, so I don't know if it had a similar whine because I was outdoors. And I have had a few folks suggest to me that maybe it's the acoustics in this cab that causes it to whine or to be so enunciated. I don't know, I've never had another tractor. I think I'm probably just getting used to it, but it seems to be a little less than it was when I first got the tractor. So next to this hydrostatic whine that I find with the tractor, the biggest thing that I'm not really happy about with this tractor is the transmission. On the B2601, when you push down your pedal to go forward or in reverse, it was almost like it was a controlled acceleration. It was always smooth as butter as you picked up speed, either in reverse or going forward, or when you lifted your foot off the pedal. Everything seemed very smooth and controlled. This tractor is not like that at all. The transmission is what I would characterize as very, very jumpy. It's kind of like when you, unless you're really, really soft on the pedal and you accelerate very, very, very slowly, if you try to push down on the pedal with any reasonable amount of pressure, the tractor kind of surges or it jumps forward. You start the tractor up, as I'm about to do, and when you start to go, 9 times out of 10, it kind of waits a little bit and then lurks forward. And similarly, when you're going through the driveway or you're driving through the forest and you go over undulations, you're going to find that the tractor will kind of lurch and go back, lurch and come back. It has for sure gotten a lot better over the last 70 hours. It's a little smoother now than it was when I first got the tractor. So maybe it's just one of those things that you break in it over time. But I can assure you it's a little unsettling. Because when you're trying to do work, whether you're trying to bucket gravel or you're using the grapple or you're snow blowing, you sometimes are in a position where you need very smooth approach or actions as you're doing that work. And it's a little unsettling when the tractor jumps forward on you. Like I said, it's a little better now than it was when I first got the tractor. I actually thought between the hydrostatic whine and this lurching forward, or the way this transmission works, I called my dealer because I thought there was something wrong with the tractor. And in fact, he confirmed it's just the way these LX models operate. And it is the way it is. Plus, I've heard from several of you over the last couple of months who have LXs, and you seem to have the same performance that I do. But those are pretty much the two biggest things I'm not really happy about with this tractor. So I think that about wraps it up. That gives you kind of at least my 4-month review on the tractor. Overall, I'm very grateful to have a cab now. I mean, hands down, best thing since sliced bread. It works. It's got a lot of appointments and features that come standard on this LX model. I'm hopeful that as we go forward, the transmission will continue to become smoother and smoother as it has over the last 70 hours, to a point where it is just as smooth as butter as my old B2601 was. However, that hydraulic whine, I could definitely do without. Thanks for sticking around today. I hope if you're looking for a tractor, the review's been helpful to you. Happy to answer any questions in the comments. If you like the channel, please click subscribe, hit the like button, and if you want to know when I'm posting videos, just click that little bell. Have a wonderful and safe week with your families. Please be kind to one another. I'll see you again on the next one. Cheers.